Hello, kings and queens. This video is pretty late, but here are my top 10 films for 2023. I've had this channel for 4 years now, and it's been exclusively about movie review. If you are one of the 100 subscribers I got from the first episode of my KOTOR retrospective, don't worry, I'm still working on that, and this channel is still producing that series. I'm going to share some thoughts about the nature of this channel at the end of this video, but I can give you a brief tease of what's coming. The most significant movie event I had in 2023 was giving up on movie theaters. Since the pandemic, I just can't trust other people to be civilized in a movie theater anymore. This isn't exclusive to one type of person. There are the old people talking like they're at brunch, the parents incapable of keeping their kids quiet, people my age talking to their dates, and younger people on their phones or putting on a flashlight to find their seat or look at a menu or something. I don't know what happened to all of civilization in the past year, but these examples have driven me to a breaking point. As of January 2024, I have canceled all of my theater memberships. This past year, I've had multiple movies ruined because of the audience, and crucially, these theaters refuse to enforce their own rules. Every theater begins with a message saying, turn off your phones, don't talk, but no one will kick these people out for doing that. Believe me, I've tried. So I'm done. I'm not going to movie theaters anymore. With that in mind, it seems unlikely anyone is interested in my reviews of movies that came out 3 to 4 months ago. I can't imagine I'll be posting more videos of movie reviews. There are other reasons contributing to that decision, but I'll hold on to that until the end. If you want to keep up with my opinions on movies, I am very active on Letterboxd. There's a link in the description. You can follow me on there. You'll get short reviews and ratings. I appreciate everyone who has followed this channel and cared about my opinion for the past 4 years, but the identity of this channel is going to change moving forward. Hopefully this ludicrously long top 10 fills in the gaps. Okay, on to the list. I want to address some movies that are not on the list. I saw these movies, but either had my experience ruined or just didn't like them that much. Poor Things. If Emma Stone wasn't listed as a producer on this movie, I could believe she was the victim of exploitation. It is obscene how much of this movie is sex scenes. It must have the world record for most sex scenes in a movie. It's probably gonna hold on to that record for a long time. This movie is also pretty shallow. The movie is essentially about a woman being reborn and starting anew, rediscovering what life is all about. It makes sense that her first fixation is hedonism and furious jumping. Ha ha ha, so funny. But it never progresses past that. Instead, it sneaks in at the end, by the way, hedonism is actually feminism, which is a joke. Andrea Dworkin is turning over in her grave. Poor Things gets a 2 out of 5. Barbie. I don't have a hot take here. It's just the theater I saw this in had lots of people talking. Shout out to Alamo Drafthouse. I canceled my membership because of this experience. I might revisit Barbie at some point. I didn't see anything I was super excited to go back to and don't really feel like I missed out on anything personally. I can't give that one a rating though because I don't really know. The Killer. I don't know what Netflix's productions criteria is, but if they've turned David Fincher into a boring filmmaker between this movie and Mank, then they have an existential problem. This movie is a lot of nothing. I'd give it a 2 out of 5. Killers of the Flower Moon. There's no dramatic tension in this movie. The main characters do the bad thing, and there isn't a single obstacle in their way. There's no opposing force, no inner doubt, no challenge they have to overcome. I understand this is like a pseudo-atrocity, but we're told what's going to happen in the first 10 minutes and spend the next 3 hours watching exactly that happen. I think Scorsese just wanted to document the events, which are based on a true story. Now he has, and it's a fine movie. I'd give it a 3 out of 5. I just didn't find it that remarkable, personally. The Boy and the Heron. Almost certainly a movie ruined by a family of 4 showing up 15 minutes after the movie started and talking the entire time. This was a 7:30 p.m. showing on a Sunday. I was trying to avoid families and children, but I wasn't able to. Can't really give this one a rating either. I'll have to revisit it at some point. Past Lives. Another movie ruined by people talking. Shout out to the Jacob Burns Film Center, who refused to kick people out despite multiple complaints on the same people. I canceled my membership because of this experience. I gave the movie a 3 out of 5 at the time. It's probably better than that. I can't really say. Across the Spider-Verse. I actually really remember loving this movie. I gave it a 5 out of 5, apparently. I just don't remember anything about it. Like, not a single thing. So I couldn't write about it now, months later, which is a little concerning, but what can you do? I saw some other movies, but I don't think they were so highly acclaimed that people are expecting them on this list. Like, I don't think anyone is waiting for my review of Asteroid City or Air. They were both fine. So let's move forward. For most of my life, I did not think I would be in the audience for this movie, but I ended up really loving Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I've tried to get into D&D, but I've had negative experiences. I've said I don't like D&D, but I think the truth is I just don't like how my idiot friends would play D&D. More than a year ago, I started as a DM for a new group of friends and really fell in love with the hobby. The best thing about this movie is it nails the tone of Dungeons & Dragons. Most of my negative experiences with D&D have been with people known as murder hobos. They actually have a name within the community. These are players who don't take the world seriously, they kill everything in sight and break every rule they can. That is the worst version of D&D, but truthfully, the best version of D&D does have some element of chaos that comes from those types of players. That better version is what's depicted in this movie. All the characters have their competencies, but the nature of the world and the quests the party needs to complete results in a lot of high-risk behavior. The movie gets this right in the very first scene. The main character is in prison and he's before a parole board deciding if he should be released early. He's waiting for one specific board member to show up who has wings so he can jump on them and fly out of the prison. Of course, the board member doesn't show up on time, so he has to stall with an elaborate story. This is already classic D&D. Things don't go as planned. The real punchline is when the board member does show up, the character successfully executes his plan, he flies out of the prison, and the audience discovers he would have been granted an early release anyway. This is just one small example, but that really is D&D in a nutshell. Creative problem solving often leading to even worse problems than if you had just let the story play out the way the DM intended. And that's what most of this movie feels like. It's okay though, because it's true to the character and it's a lot of fun, which is what this movie was. Previous adaptations of Dungeons & Dragons focused on the fantasy lore as if it was competing with Lord of the Rings. It is true D&D appeals to people who like Lord of the Rings, but that's not what the game is. The game has way more going on than grand quests and epic battles. Dungeons & Dragons is the bickering within the party, the ludicrous solutions that somehow actually work, and a diverse array of different experiences beyond just being a noble warrior on a quest. This movie took itself seriously enough to make the audience believe the emotion at the heart of the story, but Honor Among Thieves never forgets to be fun. This movie was the most fun I had at the theater, so it gets my number 10 spot. Officially released in Japan in 2022, but only released in North America in 2023, Suzume is the 4th highest grossing anime film of all time, beaten only by Your Name, Spirited Away, and Demon Slayer. I don't even like anime, but I loved this movie. The story follows the titular Suzume, a high school student who discovers a mysterious door on the outskirts of town. She opens the door and discovers a magical plane of existence. This door later becomes the entry point of a malevolent presence in the world. Suzume figures out an odd-looking cat she found near the door is the key to resolving this situation. I know this doesn't make a lot of sense, but trust me, it's a good story. A lot of this movie is Suzume chasing a cat. That may have sold the movie for some of you. We all know how chasing a cat can be the linchpin for great movies. The cat is really just a narrative device to get you invested in a short-term goal while the movie introduces other elements. Suzume is assisted by a companion named Sota. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sota is transformed into a 3-legged chair pretty early into the movie, so his form presents challenges as the two of them run around a metropolitan environment. What I liked best about this movie was its vibes. This was the best vibes of 2023. Suzume is not a Studio Ghibli film, but there are some similarities for how it handles the quieter moments. For example, the two main characters spend an evening at a bar interacting with the guests for a night. It's not a significant story beat. They don't really accomplish anything there, but I just liked spending some time imagining a world where I'm at a bar in Japan. You get a lot of these moments in the first half of the movie before it focuses on a more traditional adventure story in the second half. The second half of the movie does an incredible job tying the central antagonist to real-world Japanese myth and integrating it into modern history of Japan. The force of nature working against the protagonists has the ability to cause earthquakes. Japan has a history of catastrophic earthquakes, and anyone familiar with this history will connect with the storytelling in Suzume's narrative. If you're an American, it's as if there was a movie about global warming was caused by the West's culture deviating from Christianity. That's an imprecise example, but the point is the movie connects real-world events with long-standing mythic stories. It felt eerie, like you were hearing a conspiracy theory for the first time, but it sounds a little more plausible than you were expecting. I really enjoyed this movie. It has a minor pacing problem in the second half, but that was really my only gripe. If you like the vibes of a Studio Ghibli film, or if you just like Japan, this is definitely worth your time. You may know American Fiction as that movie that makes fun of wokeness, but it's surprisingly more than that. The pitch of this movie is a black author is frustrated by his lack of success, so he decides to write a stereotypical black book. The black book is meant to ridicule the publishing industry's perception of black Americans, so it has all the cliches of gang violence and poverty and black vernacular English. This is in contrast to the main character, who is closer to a stuffy college professor type of personality. To his surprise, the parody book is an instant success, which leads to the author developing misgivings about the parody and his whole experiment. That is technically what the movie is about, but I was surprised how much of this movie is not about that. This is really a story about discerning your true self from the perception of you others piece together. There's a clear relationship to that in the central pitch of the movie, but this really isn't a movie about owning the libs. This is closer to a family drama with some pretty heavy plot developments you might not expect. The insight the movie has into those family dynamics is why I liked the movie. Truthfully, I don't think the wokeness critique sticks the landing. There are some reversals on your perception of that issue that I think are well done, but when it tries to link the family drama to its central pitch, it doesn't really work. Most of this movie is about identity in the "are you being the real you" type of identity. That is presented in contrast to identity, like what is your race and ethnicity type of identity. The movie ends on the "are you the real you" identity theme, but it does this through a metaphor about sexual orientation. It's a confused comparison that I don't think works. The important point is this movie doesn't end with a lecture, doesn't tell you what to think, and it's not cringe with its critique. I'm always happy when Hollywood makes movies about life right now, and it seems like this topic is something no one wants to touch. I don't know how pointing out cultural hypocrisy became a conservative viewpoint. I feel like pointing out hypocrisy should be a universal viewpoint. This movie is about something everyone knows is happening, and I'm glad there is this story about that. I think this movie handles it well without being pandering, but like I said, the real appeal is in its theme on identity. One of the few movies I got to review last year was Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. It took me some time to figure out if I actually liked the movie or not, but I've settled on the opinion that this is a unique horror comedy film. You did not mishear me. The appeal of this movie is its humor. I know the Cronenberg name is synonymous with grim horror. Brandon Cronenberg's previous movie, Possessor, was also incredibly grim and fit into the horror genre. Infinity Pool is also grim and self-serious. You can get so distracted by that aesthetic, you don't realize that the movie is really funny. It took me like half the runtime to figure that out. This movie is about a failed novelist who goes to a resort to unwind. He has a strange encounter with a woman who claims to be a fan of the main character's failed novel. This results in the two having several encounters that are strange. Early in the movie, the novelist commits a crime, which results in a pretty harsh punishment, but the oddity of this resort begins to reveal itself as a result. There is a cloning facility which inspires the novelist and this new friend to partake in very bizarre recreational activities that could be described as self-hating. There may be a film theory thesis to write about this movie, but I doubt it. I think this movie is meant to be a wild ride of entertainment and nothing more than that. If you view it from this lens, a lot of the creative decisions make a lot of sense. The wacky procedures Alexander Skarsgård has to go through, or Mia Goth's overacting, or the casual immorality of every decision in the film, and not to mention the bizarre ending sequence. It's all for laughs. In the grand library of cinema, Infinity Pool may not be a remarkable movie. I really like the fact that it felt unique. It is a weird movie, the type of weird you see less and less of these days. I'm happy to include it as one of my favorites just for that reason. Another movie that was a casualty in my negative theater experiences was Oppenheimer. I saw this movie at Alamo Drafthouse where the projection was out of focus and they incorrectly balanced the sound so you couldn't really hear what was being said for most of the movie. This is of course devastating for a movie that's almost entirely people talking in rooms. I've since rewatched the movie and I did like it a lot more the second time around, but I'll always have that negative first impression, which really sucks. Honestly, this experience was one of the major reasons why I decided to stop going to theaters. Anyway, I did enjoy Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan is one of the last filmmakers who can do whatever he wants. The man made a 3-hour biopic on a nerd and it made $1 billion. That alone is incredible. I think this movie was successful because Nolan really depicted the story in a way that was unique. The film conveys the sense of urgency of Oppenheimer's life through how it's shot. The opening scenes with the deafening sound design, somewhat abstract visualizations, and rapid cuts between scenes I thought got us quickly into the mind of the protagonist. He is pioneering new theories within physics. That is an exciting position to be in, but it's hard to translate that type of scientific excitement into film. Nolan did it though. The movie is exciting without tying it to other traditionally exciting things. There is no violence in this movie. There's also not a lot of political debate or that type of conflict, which I thought was an interesting decision. Oppenheimer's struggle is him coming to believe his work on the atomic bomb was bad for humanity. The movie doesn't depict this idea as something to debate. It is just stated as Oppenheimer's view and something he struggles with throughout the movie. I think this is consistent with Nolan's other work, which tends to portray ambitious men who verge on self-destruction. I like how this movie showed the cost of being an indispensable talent. Powerful entities want you to work for them, but that comes with a lot of conditions that become a liability for having a happy life. Oppenheimer successfully oversaw the Manhattan Project, but the cost was tension with his wife, increased scrutiny of his brother, and a number of betrayals among his colleagues due to the manipulation of powerful interests. All of that is a lot of pressure on top of realizing your most notable contribution to humanity may have been a mistake. At least, that's how Oppenheimer viewed it. I did have two gripes with this movie. I think it is a good thing the last hour of this movie exists, but you get little indication it's coming. The movie feels incredibly long as a result. Another problem is I didn't understand most of what happened in that final hour. I think this can be resolved by watching the movie a second time or reading Oppenheimer's Wikipedia page before seeing the movie, but for a first watch, it wasn't a great experience. The other disappointment I had with this movie was the ensemble cast. Believe it or not. Every actor is great, but I actually found the star power in this movie to distract from its story. Casey Affleck's character is set up like this imposing presence that's really important, but he's barely in the movie. I don't understand why they did that. A number of other actors are underutilized. I think Emily Blunt's contributions were pretty weak, and I don't know what happened to Rami Malek's career, that he's taking roles that barely pass the SAG threshold for being an extra. I don't think the casting benefited the movie. Overall, Oppenheimer is a great movie. I'm glad Nolan has proven he can do a straight drama without time manipulation or his other psychological thriller shtick. I'm also thrilled this movie was so successful. Biopics are the anti-superhero movie, and this one proved more successful than most. My number 5 pick is what I consider to be the most slept-on movie by general audiences, BlackBerry. This is a biopic of the two people who invented and oversaw the business of BlackBerry phones. BlackBerry has an interesting anthology framing. These are 3 different stories about the same 2 characters at the same company at very different times in that company. We see how it starts, when they were dominating the market, and when it all falls apart. I haven't seen a movie written like that before, so it was an interesting framing. The benefit of this framing is this is an electric movie to watch. Every scene is gripping, full of tension, and substantive to the story being told. As much credit as I give Oppenheimer for being an exciting biopic, BlackBerry does it better. It is more exciting. This is a movie of back-to-back memorable moments all the way to the end. The best thing about BlackBerry is the writing of the 2 main characters based off of Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie. First of all, these characters are played by 2 actors who I don't think get a lot of credit. Mike Lazaridis is played by Jay Baruchel. You may know him from when he had his moment in the 2010s as Discount Michael Cera, but has since basically retired since he made it big with How to Train Your Dragon. I don't think anyone was really clamoring for Baruchel's comeback, but this movie is a good starting point for that. The other lead is Glenn Howerton, who plays the ruthless businessman Jim Balsillie, and most people know him from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, though you may not recognize him because he is bald in this movie. Both of them play polar opposite characters, but what's incredible is how much chemistry they maintain despite the gulf in their personalities. Baruchel isn't doing his typical shtick of being an awkward dope. Well, in a way he is, but it's more than that. His character truly feels isolated from his peers. He's always fixated on the technical problem in front of them, often to the detriment of his ability to relate to others. He's not a glamorized Hollywood nerd, he is a true nerd. He says things inelegantly. He's rude and he's kind of mean. He is all these things because he's very passionate about his work, which is evident in the performance. Howerton, by comparison, gets to play the fun role, where he is loud and insane. You You could say most of the appeal of this movie is Howerton being a funny and charismatic maniac, but focusing on the bombast is a disservice to the chemistry of both characters, which is really unique. Howerton and Baruchel feel like two people from different planets. This isn't like an Aaron Sorkin script where everyone talks the same, has the same sense of humor, and the same level of intelligence. You can feel the difference between these two, but they share a common language of success at any cost, and a little bit of resentment for anyone that doubts them. It's so interesting to see how different they are, but retain that strong connection. It's one of the most interesting dynamics I've seen between two actors, but I'm not usually someone who cares about acting. Blackberry is an awesome movie. Don't let it be ignored. It is worth your time. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning was a box office disappointment. It is very likely you didn't see it. I implore you to correct this mistake. The movie didn't do well because it was released at a bad time. If you think the reason you haven't heard much about Dead Reckoning is because it is secretly bad, you are wrong. This is the best Mission Impossible movie. Even though it is an incomplete movie, this is part one of a two-part story, even though there are some decisions that are a little half-baked, this movie makes up for any stumbling because it has the franchise's best set pieces and the most compelling antagonist of any action movie in a long time. This is the third Mission Impossible movie directed by Christopher McQuarrie. This is the guy who wrote The Usual Suspects and then made The Way of the Gun because he never wanted to write another crime movie again. He also wrote Edge of Tomorrow, which is hailed as one of the best action movies in the modern era. McQuarrie knows how to write a movie, and he only works on projects he thinks are interesting. There's a reason this is the third Mission Impossible movie he's made. Dead Reckoning set pieces are so interesting because they weave in the story's complexity, and they are unique set pieces. The airport sequence at the beginning of this movie is just as intense as anything else in the franchise, and it's accomplished without firing a single shot. I don't even know if there's a physical fist fight of any kind. It's just all manipulation of tension. Within the set piece, we learn what the main character Ethan Hunt is after, the two different factions chasing after Hunt, and we see Hunt's objective is complicated by a new character who's caught in the middle of everything. The set pieces in this movie are more than action reversals. They are plot reversals, the classic Mission Impossible trope of fake identities and changing allegiances and not trusting who you're working with and all that spy stuff. It is as good as it has ever been, maybe better. I can't deny Henry Cavill was great in Fallout, but this movie is still engaging even without a similar high charisma antagonist. The antagonist I did like in Dead Reckoning was not the literal person acting on behalf of the bad guy, but the conceptual antagonist known as the Entity. Dead Reckoning's villain is artificial intelligence. Thematically, the villain of Mission Impossible is a cold, faceless machine, and the hero of Mission Impossible is America's most well-known movie star, Tom Cruise. Not even Ethan Hunt. This movie is about Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise has synthesized his existence with the archetype of a movie star. A movie star is more than an occupation. It is a type of celebrity that formed a relationship with audiences. Until recently, Hollywood operated under the star system. Movies were successful based on the star power of the lead actor. Hollywood knew people would see a movie they weren't otherwise interested in simply because the star of the movie was someone they liked. People like Tom Hanks, Will Smith, or Julia Roberts at one point in time. Why would you watch a movie about a guy playing Survivor on an island by himself? Because it stars Tom Hanks, and people really like Tom Hanks. The star system asked audiences to trust people. Trust Brad Pitt to pick interesting projects. Trust Mel Gibson to direct a movie with good story structure. Trust another human being to know what's best. That star system is dead. It has been replaced by a cold analysis of the art form. It's when Netflix influenced its content to have a hook in the first 5 minutes because data suggests that's when people stop watching. It's when movies like Batgirl finish production but never get released because Warner Brothers thinks they'll make more money by listing it as an expense on their taxes. Stars don't even exist anymore. There's just brands. People will watch a Spider-Man movie 3 different times, regardless of who's in it, but they won't watch Uncharted because no one actually cares about Tom Holland. The only stars left in Hollywood are what's left of the previous era, and one of the last of Hollywood's stars is Tom Cruise in the Mission Impossible franchise. Dead Reckoning's antagonist is the force threatening to eliminate franchises like Mission Impossible and stars like Tom Cruise. A data-driven, cold-hearted analysis that lacks empathy or emotion for human beings. Dead Reckoning keeps this story in the context of a spy thriller, but the allegory is obvious. This movie is fighting against what's killing movies. It is the most compelling villain in an action movie since Agent Smith in The Matrix. I loved this movie. I cannot tell you how disappointing it is to know it was a box office failure. They're even changing the name, so it's not going to be Dead Reckoning Part 2. It's going to be something completely different. I have to imagine they're rewriting the sequel to be standalone because the performance was so bad. Whatever happens with the final film, Dead Reckoning will always be the best Mission Impossible movie. So I'm happy to have it so high on my list. I know I said Blackberry is the most slept on movie from 2023, but The Iron Claw is a close contender. This is a wrestling movie about the Von Erich family, a story so tragic they actually cut some of the tragedy from the movie because the filmmakers were concerned audiences wouldn't believe it. The story focuses on Kevin Von Erich, played by an unbelievably jacked Zac Efron, who is concerned his family is cursed. The Von Erichs are attempting to be a wrestling dynasty guided by an overbearing and resentful patriarch who is the father to the four brothers in the movie, Kevin, Carrie, David, and Mike. Throughout the events of the story, you come to discover the real curse of the family is the judgmental and cruel father who pushes each son past their breaking point. I imagine a lot of people will not check out this movie because it's about wrestling, but I'd argue it's more of a family drama, which is weird. I think this is the third family drama on this list. It's not a popular genre outside of last year, I guess. The value of this story isn't the intricate details of wrestling in the 70s and 80s. It's seeing how this family relates to one another while navigating a toxic family dynamic. It's a unique dynamic because this is an emotional story focused on a group of masculine wrestlers who don't express their emotions very much. If you're a guy who's lived through an unsupportive family structure, this movie will certainly resonate in some way. It is a tragedy this movie didn't get recognized for the acting in it. I was impressed with Zac Efron's ability to carry the movie despite being a character who is notably uncharismatic. Like, the actor is fine. He's still a likable lead to guide us through the story. I just thought it was interesting that his character is the least articulate and outgoing and charming brother of the four, but he's the main character. I think this movie really succeeds because of Holt McCallany, who plays the father. He has a great presence in every scene he's in. I actually remember this guy from Shot Caller, where he plays a white supremacist gang leader, and it's a similar vibe he gives off in this movie. He always feels like he's at the edge of going berserk, but never does. He rules his family through intimidation and emotional abuse rather than physical abuse, but it's just as devastating. I think he should have gotten more credit because the movie is successful because of his presence. I struggle to say anything more interesting about this movie because, yeah, the appeal is really just getting exposed to this true story, which is just unbelievably tragic. I can't think of another movie that focused on male emotions in this way. That's what makes it unique and one of the better films from 2023. Another one of my favorite movies that was technically released in 2022 but officially released in 2023, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. I reviewed this movie last year. It was one of my last reviews before I stopped posting videos. I won't belabor the point. I love when people make movies about real life today, right now. How to Blow Up a Pipeline is about a group of young people who feel they are pushed to eco-terrorism because of the desperate state of climate change. At the risk of alienating people who would like this movie the most and would like the fact that I like this movie the most, I want to say I think the people in this movie are just wrong. Climate change is real. I don't dispute that. I just don't think blowing up pipelines is going to accomplish anything. If it does, it will only further radicalize people against common sense green initiatives, of which there aren't that many. I don't want to get all political on this channel, but the point is, I don't like this movie because I am sympathetic to eco-terrorists. I like this movie because it's real. This is an ensemble cast with 8 different people who come to the environmentalist movement for very different reasons. One person had their land taken by eminent domain for an oil project. Another person was exposed to deadly chemicals and are now dying of cancer. Another person is a nihilist who co-opted the environmentalist goals to act on their own self-destructive tendencies. Another person is a passionate young student who wants to make a difference in the world, and etc. All of these stories are truthful. I haven't met an actual eco-terrorist, but I have met people like the ones in this movie. They are real, and they are truthfully depicted in this movie. These are stories that are not being told anywhere else in film right now. Everyone knows there's an intense environmentalist movement that is persuasive to a lot of people these days, but there are no movies about it. There are no movies showing who these people are, what they think, and what drives them. There are no movies other than this one. How to Blow Up a Pipeline is also a gripping thriller. It feels like a bank heist movie with everything you love about that genre. The personality clashes within the group, seeing what everyone's job is in the heist, the unexpected changes to the plan, and the high-stakes tension of wondering if they're actually going to get away with it or not. This movie is barely an hour and a half, and it cruises by at incredible pace. Honestly, by the end of the movie, I wasn't certain if it was just beginning and we were going to get to the real bulk of the story, but no, it's just because the pacing was so fast, I didn't realize the entire movie had gone by. Which isn't to say the ending is unsatisfying. I think it's an appropriate endpoint. This movie doesn't make a commentary on if ecoterrorism is successful or even worth it, but it does articulate what people who hold these beliefs think might happen if someone were to do this. Whether or not that's true can't be answered right now, which is why I think the movie ends where it does. It's a smart decision. How to Blow Up a Pipeline is a great action thriller that just so happens to be about a salient topic. I spent most of the year thinking this would be my number one pick, but I had a recent change of heart. Number one is the latest addition to my list, so I may have some recency bias, but I doubt it. Zone of Interest. This is the World War II film following the day-to-day life of the Nazi family who oversaw operations at Auschwitz. There is no violence or atrocities shown in this movie. You only see the mundane moments of this family's life. This movie was made by Jonathan Glazer, who also did Under the Skin, and stylistically it is surprising these two films are so similar. Glazer is a very tone-oriented filmmaker. He's made more music videos than movies, which rely on the aesthetics being compelling on their own. We're so familiar with the story anchoring our attachment to a film that it's difficult to imagine movies can be compelling without a story. Zone of Interest is proof the visual art form of film can be compelling on its own. There isn't really a plot in Zone of Interest until more than halfway into the movie, and it's not a terribly engaging plot either. At some point, the officer realizes he's going to be transferred, but he wants to stay with his family. I was struck by this film because despite the plot being non-existent, it was such an engaging experience, while being unlike any movie I've seen in recent memory. This movie starts with what feels like 5 minutes of a black screen and a haunting soundscape. The sounds aren't distinct. It's not exactly music, and it's not exactly diegetic sound. It's a mood piece that coalesces into what you would expect to hear on a warm spring day, which is where the film begins, a spring outing with the family. If we started with the spring outing on its own, that would be a mishandling of the tone, but the soundscape puts us in the appropriate mood for this film, which is a combination of unease and discomfort. Even though the actual events in the movie are dull, things like trying on a new coat or setting the table for lunch, the aesthetics of the film always keeps us uncomfortable no matter how dull the events are. Of course, there's more to these moments than meets the eye. That new coat she's trying on isn't something she purchased from a store, it's one that was confiscated by a prisoner who has now been exterminated. She jokes about getting something from France, but how could they possibly get something from France, given the war that's going on? The implication is from France is a euphemism for taking something from a French prisoner in the camp. This anecdote suggests the people living in the house next to Auschwitz have become so familiar speaking about atrocities that they made a joke out of it. This movie is a collection of those harrowing anecdotes. They are harrowing because you see how easy it is to integrate a vile worldview into an otherwise ordinary life. It's easy to talk about specific moments in this film and how affecting they are, but the real accomplishment of this movie is its cinematography and sound design, or really its sound design and also its cinematography. I can't overstate how engaging this movie is despite not a lot going on, and it's all because of the creative decisions and the tonal control. Choosing to show some scenes in thermal vision or fading from a macro shot to just a full frame of red. These are filmic decisions you'd expect to see in a theory textbook, not in an actual movie. Zone of Interest integrates avant-garde filmmaking techniques, but it does it while remaining a coherent film. This isn't a pretentious movie that you have to decipher. The point of the film is very clear, and even if you can guess the point it wants to make, knowing that doesn't detract from the experience of watching it. It's basically impossible to make something compelling when everyone watching knows what's going to happen, but that's what Zone of Interest does. It does that because it's just an astonishing piece of art. Zone of Interest is unlike any movie in the past decade, and it's the best film from last year. I would say more about Zone of Interest, but there's a lot to say, and it would take so long for me to ensure I said it correctly that I would just never release this video. So there you go, that's the list. Zone of Interest was my favorite movie last year. A lot of great stuff last year, though, overall. If you're interested in the future of this channel, I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. As I mentioned, a major motivator for not wanting to do reviews anymore is because I just hate going to movie theaters now. I'm pretty upset about that development, and I've been wanting to deny it for multiple years, but making this list really proved to me that I just can't do it anymore. I had more than a half a dozen movies ruined by other people this past year, so I just can't go to theaters anymore. I'm just not going to enjoy movies as much if I'm pressuring myself to go see them at the theater. The other major problem with this channel is making movie content isn't as interesting as it once was. I'm 32 right now. I revived this channel in 2020 when I was 28. Some people might be following me from when I made videos in 2008 when I was 16. Since I was 16, I've always wanted to make videos on YouTube. I've been on a decade-long quest to get into a position where I could just do that. Now I have a stable living condition. I have a good job. I feel like I'm firmly planted in my life, but it just took so long that now there are other things I want to do, and I know they're going to take a long time. I uploaded a Knights of the Old Republic retrospective video back in September. It took 200 hours to make and more than 4 months. If I wanted to make another 4 of those videos, that's an entire year of effort. I want to do other things, and it feels like if I don't do them now, then I never will. I never thought I would be alive to see 30 years old. I don't know what I thought would happen. I just didn't think it would happen. And despite blowing past 30, I feel the same way about turning 40. It just doesn't seem like something that's going to happen. So I have this restlessness. I need to pursue things I want to do just for my own well-being. I am grateful for this channel because it allowed me to practice writing long-form content. A lot of these videos are pretty long. I don't know a lot of people who can say anything worthwhile about anything they care about. I was the same way when I was younger before I had this channel, but this channel let me practice that skill, and now I have dozens of videos talking about movies I love. Some of these videos prepared me for projects I want to take on now. For example, I did a Spirited Away video that nobody watched, but it showed me I can construct a coherent long-form analysis. That was a success in my mind because it showed that I could do it. It just took a really long time. The raid video, which was requested by my friend Dante, so I owe him for that video's success. That video showed me people would be interested in my analysis if I picked the right topic and wrote about it in the right way. I feel more confident doing other projects I've always wanted to do, and I have this channel to thank for that. The main problem with movie reviews is they are secondary content. You need to watch a movie to be in the potential audience for my videos. I'd rather make content that stands on its own. Even something like the KOTOR video can do that, because it's meant to be accessible for people who have never played the game. In fact, you probably like it better if you haven't played the game. When I started this channel again, I didn't have a lot going on in my life, but now I do. I'm strangely active in my city's local government. I write about urbanist policies and other topics which tangibly impact where I live, which writing about movies doesn't do. I also have a part-time gig writing about the energy industry, which is really interesting. I also have that D&D campaign I mentioned, which is a type of creative writing that's been surprisingly a lot of fun. All these things are new and they're challenging, and I'm learning things every time I do them. Whereas with movies, everything's just so familiar, I don't feel like I'm saying anything interesting anymore. Even in this video, I said gripping, tension, and compelling like 5 times. I don't know how people aren't annoyed by this. I feel like I say that in every review I write. Anyway, the point, I guess, is I'm dragging my feet to say it, but I just don't find movie critique interesting anymore, so I'm not going to do it anymore. I still love movies. I still watch movies. You can follow me on Letterboxd if you think my recommendations have been valuable to you. But this channel isn't going to be movie reviews anymore. It's going to be for other projects. In the immediate future, it's going to be the other 2 episodes of that KOTOR video and whatever comes after that. Maybe nothing. I do appreciate everyone who has commented on my videos. I request that a lot, and it's because those comments really make my day. It means a lot to see someone say my writing helped them understand their own love for a movie that I also love. That's a good feeling. It feels like making this stuff was worth it just for one of those comments, and I've been very lucky to receive a lot of those comments over the past 4 years. If you are subscribed to this channel just for the movie reviews and you choose to unsubscribe, I won't take it personally. Maybe stick around and check out my other content first, but I won't blame you if you don't. I also won't blame you if you don't get this message because this video is absurdly long. But that's it. I'm still making content. It's going to be different and not as frequent, hopefully longer and more compelling. Other than that, until next time, stay strong, Royals.